Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome in. Happy Tuesday. Welcome in to the virtual networking discussion for the supervisors in government community of practice. We're so glad you're here. We'll give everyone a moment or two to get oriented and get comfortable. Per usual, we do have a little bit of an icebreaker here we can do in the chat. So coming off of our nice long holiday weekend, I'd like to know what everyone's favorite cookout food is. So again, feel free to put your answer in the chat. Wait about another 60 seconds here for some other folks to join us. Karen's getting us started here. Cheeseburgers. Yes. Perennial favorite here. Fruit salad. Oh, the deviled egg. Always a good one. Pulled pork. This is always so dangerous when I do these food icebreakers before dinner. I'm just so hungry. Fried chicken. Leslie, do you have a favorite top of mind?
I have to pick the lowly hot dog. I
Yeah,
love a hot dog.
love a hot dog. Classic for a reason.
Right, right. I see brat is just a fancy hot dog. I'll just take the mystery meat hot dog.
Extremely fun. Yeah. I also like coleslaw. I like the vinegary coleslaw, not the sweet one. I know I might be alone in that, but the crunchy cold coleslaw on a hot dog, I really like.
Yeah, I like that too. I
Yeah.
like that.
Uh,
Yeah.
no, like I said, I'm getting really hungry here.
It's meat heavy.
Yes, I am noticing that. And then Jamie with the kebabs. Yes, we're actually doing that tonight.
Oh.
They're so easy, so I love that. Okay, well, we're at 4:02, so now I'm hungry, but we have to get started. So welcome in again to everyone to our supervisors in government virtual networking discussion. If you've been here before, you know the drill. We will get started with that discussion shortly, but if you're new, welcome in. This is very exciting. This is a place where we gather once a month virtually, of course, to talk about a topic that's relevant to supervisors in government or folks who are aspiring to be in a supervisory position in government. So most of you have already gotten a hang of the chat here, but for those of you who have not played around with that yet, feel free to put comments or questions in the chat there, connect with each other, maybe share what agency or organization you're from. We do want you all to be connecting with each other as well. Um, Speaking of connecting, we also have a LinkedIn group specifically for this community of practice as well. So we'll share that link in the follow-up email, but we, want to be able to facilitate connections here with this group. So feel free to carry over the conversation in that group as well. Um, and yes, today I have the pleasure of being joined by Leslie O'Flahaven, who's the principal at eWrite. So thanks for joining us today, Leslie. I'm really excited to get into it with you.
Me too, me too. I love the questions and I'm really happy to be here. Thanks.
Of course. Today we are talking about tips for effective communication, in the context of supervisors in government. So we can get started with the first question here. So Leslie, can you describe a time and message you sent, whether by email, in a meeting, over the phone, whatever medium, that was misunderstood? And maybe we can kind of get into what the cause of the breakdown was there. So we're kind of just thinking through a situation where effective communication didn't really happen.
Yeah,
Maybe your
yeah.
message was misconstrued or misinterpreted.
Well, you're asking me to keep it real, so I'll do that because the very first question is about a blunder I made. So I do have a good example. A client asked me if I would deliver a workshop, and I was really excited, and I really wanted to deliver the workshop. She asked me by email, so I responded by email. And I basically said something like, "Hi, I have a few questions." And I started to list questions. When will it be virtual on site? How many people will attend? What are the goals? And I added a lot of questions out of enthusiasm, but it was a lot of questions. And when she replied, she said to me, "I'm confused. Are you really interested in doing this, or are you just setting up roadblocks?" And I was shocked because no, I wasn't setting up roadblocks at all, but I learned a lot about the order of information and the amount of detail that was appropriate. So you're asking here what caused the breakdown, and I think I know what caused the breakdown was she wanted a simple answer, are you interested in doing this workshop? And had I started that way, saying, "Hi, thank you for asking me. Yes, I'm really interested in doing this workshop." That would have been the right thing to do to put the main message at the beginning, the bottom line up front. That's what I would do differently. Start with the simple, direct answer to the question I have been asked, and then continue by listing the questions, but answer the main question first.
Sure. I feel like in email, that's particularly important because half the time people aren't going to read your entire
Mm.
message. They might just get to that first point and, then they're already reacting to that. So
Mhm.
I can see that happening quite a bit. Um,
Yes, and also,
yeah.
I'm supposed to be really, really good at this. My
Mhm.
whole profession is about communicating and communicating via email, communicating in writing. So I was surprised when she re responded the way she did, and I was really, really had to look at myself and do better.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely get more into that because, as we all know, interpretation, especially of emails and written messages, just plays a huge part in all of this. I'm excited to kind of dig into that and other questions too.
Hmm.
So our second question here for you is how do you balance being transparent with your team when you might not have all the answers or information yet, especially when you're communicating to different groups of stakeholders too? So I think this comes up for a lot of us, particularly in this
Yes.
audience of being supervisors and managers. You're being told something, maybe you can't kind of go through line by line what you know for who you're communicating it to. So just kind of taking into account the nuance of messages for different audiences, but again, trying your best to maintain a high level of transparency for your team.
I like to think about transparency as having two parts. The part is what you tell people or how much you can tell people. And as you mentioned, you may know more about a situation than you can reveal. And you're concerned that you're not being transparent because you know more than you're going to tell everyone. But the first part is what you are going to say, what you put forward. But the other part of being transparent is how you receive people's questions and what you do to answer their questions. So I think it's safer and it's more lasting to remember that you have actually two tasks in being transparent. So let's say you have to tell your team that going forward, you won't be able to hire for interns as you have done for all the years, 10 years past. And you can't tell them why yet. You can't tell them why, but you know that you're not going to be hiring for interns. So the first responsibility you have is to say that clearly, even though they are going to be disappointed, maybe even angry, or they may even think that you deceived them. But you must tell them clearly, we are not going to be hiring for interns next summer, for example. And then now your next act of transparency is how you receive their questions or their disappointment and what you do with it. And you can receive it well or you can receive it poorly and compound their sense that they're being deceived. So the best way to receive people's questions is to solicit their questions, paraphrase their questions, demonstrate that you've heard their questions, and tell them when you'll answer their questions with a date and a time if you really want to be transparent. And if you can't answer their questions, even at the date that you've promised them, you're still following up with the promised communication.
Mhm. Thank you for providing an example. I think that helps a lot of just understanding what you're saying about those sort of two jobs we have. I think it's always just so uncomfortable when we just have to say, I don't know yet. but I
Hmm.
will follow up. Like sometimes that's just the best you can do. I don't
Yes.
know yet, but I will let you know.
But I like the fact that you mentioned the discomfort. It is uncomfortable, but I always imagine what would I say if I could speak as freely as possible? If I could say everything, what would I say? And if the answer really is I don't know whether we'll be able to even hire one, but I do know we can't hire four, then
Mm-hmm.
you have to say what you know. You just have to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's helpful. I like Anne's comment here, but I'm going to come back to it, I think, because I think it's going to be in line with one of our questions. So, Anne, I see it and I want to address that too. So number three here, what's the one thing you can do to make your team feel genuinely heard, whether in a one-on-one conversation, team meeting, or a virtual setting? Um, yeah, this is a big one, right? And this is a big responsibility for the supervisors among us. To your point, a couple, points ago about soliciting these questions. So let's say someone's coming to you with these questions. How do you, to your note about receiving these, how can we make that authentic and what are the signals people can look for to, you know, say that they do feel that they're being heard?
Well, I want to offer kind of a silly example, kind of a ridiculous one. In classic sitcoms, whenever there's a therapist in a classic sitcom, that therapist is saying on a loop, "What I hear you saying is," so the character in the sitcom comes into the therapy session and says, "I'm afraid of spiders," and then the therapist says, "What I hear you saying is you're afraid of spiders." And that's really corny. I know that's a corny example, but I think it's the best way to show that you're genuinely listening is to repeat back what you're hearing and give the person a chance to correct what you're hearing if you're repeating back if you've made a mistake or if in fact by talking they're coming to understand what they really mean to say. So to make your team feel genuinely heard, I would say introduce the behavior of saying, I hear you asking questions about funding this internship. Is it, are you mostly concerned about the budget for those interns, or are you more concerned about responsibility for who will manage them? So I guess we can just keep that as a model. What I hear you saying is that what you're really saying? And I
Mhm.
think that behavior works in conversation, a team meeting, virtual setting. You can say it. You don't want to be corny like I'm being, but that's the model, I think.
Yeah. And the simple phrase too, of like, did I get that right? So when you
Hmm.
repeat, it's just, just inviting to your point too. Like if you didn't get it right, let them correct you and clarify. So I think that's
Right.
super helpful. I am gonna touch on two comments here. So Anne, this is the question I think it's in line with here, but and saying being sensitive to how your colleagues or perhaps again in the supervisory context, your reports receive information goes a long way. So yeah, it's important to understand that Charlie needs information up front. Claire likes instructions. Chloe likes to listen better in person. I like all these C names. I noticed that. But yeah, can you talk maybe a little bit about how supervisors can manage that too, a little bit about managing and working with different communication styles. I think that might be our next question too. So, um,
Yes. Yeah, I love the amount of personalization Anne is implying in her comment, and also just the generosity in Anne's comment, where the supervisor is willing to maybe say the same thing three different ways because there are three people reporting to her and she needs to adjust the way she communicates. Um, and if you have been supervising someone for a while or working for them or working, as colleagues in the same rung on the org chart, you may know how they like to receive information. The challenge is, of course, that when we're communicating with people, or so many of them that we can't adjust our communication for each, or when we don't know how they like to receive information. So we just have to do our best putting the main point forward and demonstrating that we will pursue an answer if we don't have one now, and it won't be at some vague time in the future. It'll be a
Mhm.
time we announce.
Right. And I think too, this is something we can share in the follow-up email is, you can ask people too what their communication styles are, particularly folks on your team. That's not always sustainable if you're, managing maybe a ton of people, but
Hmm.
that is, there's tools. And again, we can share a link to, I think we have a quiz maybe, so people can learn a little bit more about themselves too around communication styles and share that with their colleagues too. So it's
Hmm.
always helpful. Um, and then before we move on to Jamel, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but I thought this was an interesting comment. Mm, Let's talk about rumor mill, or maybe when information is kind of being shared around formal outlets or things are sort of on a runaway train. Just this scenario of people are getting information not directly from you. So how can we kind of manage that? I know that's going outside the scope of this a little bit, but just curious if you have some advice there.
I think the techniques we've talked about already help us manage the gossip hotline, or the more polite term, the rumor mill.
Mhm.
But we just keep saying, I know what people are asking. I haven't heard this question from the six of you on the call, or the three of you I'm addressing in this email, but I have heard that people are worried about their jobs. They're worried they're going to have to give up their remote work days and come into the office all the time. You just say, I have heard this.
Mhm.
Years and years ago, I knew people who worked for a state agency in Missouri that started a blog called Rumor Central, because this state agency managed employees' benefits, and a lot of retired employees were really worried that that the state legislature was going to shrink their benefits. So what did they decide to do? They started a blog called Rumor Central, and its
Mhm.
full purpose was to publish the rumor and then refute it. And I think that's the fresh air, the antiseptic. Let's clean up the swampy kind of communication we have. Let's just acknowledge that you're hearing
Mhm.
gossip or a rumor and call it as what it is, but then use the same transparency techniques to address it.
Yeah, yeah, that acknowledgement piece I think is so powerful for getting that
Hmm.
thing under control. Okay, so how do you adjust your communication style, your tone, level of detail, or channel, depending on your audience? So we did talk about this a little bit, but let's be realistic. Sometimes this isn't always something you can do on a dime, change your style to adjust to everyone around you. But just generally, what are some sort of best practices we can do?
I do have a really good piece of advice for how you adjust your communication style. But right before I give it, I just want to remind us, or all of us, we adjust our communication styles in our private life all the time. And we may have 10 communication styles for 10 interactions. There's the friends that you swear with all the time and the friends that you never swear with. There's the people who you won't talk about sports or politics with at all. They're off limits. And then there's the people you talk about those topics only. So if we have the skill to adjust our communication style so subtly and frequently in our private lives, we can call on that skill in our work. It's not too hard for us. We do it all the time. So here's my advice. You should match your communication style to your purpose for that communication. So you have to ask yourself, what do I want to accomplish here? Okay. So let's say you're writing an email to three of your reports, and you're saying, let's get the July 1 webinar launched on June 15th instead. That's the topic. That's a big ask because we're losing a couple weeks and there's a holiday in there. So, what is your purpose? Your purpose is to motivate them and to get them moving right away. So, you use a communication style that suits that purpose. But in another case, maybe people are doing something that you have asked them to stop doing, and you've asked more than once. So now you need to write an email where the purpose is to stop that behavior. Maybe it's working overtime. We can't afford it. We don't want you to do it. Stop doing it. And now your style needs to be a bit more direct, less warm, not cold and rude, but less warm because your purpose is to stop a behavior. So I think we often we're quite aware of what we want, what the content of our communication is. We know what we want to tell people, but we don't think as frequently, what do I want to accomplish here? What is my purpose for communicating? And once we know it, we can match our style to our purpose.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a helpful reframe, and it makes it feel a little bit more reasonable too. Like I can't maybe meet everybody's needs, but I need to meet the need of and the purpose of the information I have to communicate to someone.
Right.
Yeah, so I like that reframe for sure. So at the top we asked you about a communication breakdown, and we're going to ask you again here, but what's a communication breakdown you've seen? So maybe not something that you've done yourself, but maybe something that comes up commonly, in a workplace situation with supervisors and teams. So whether it's a poorly timed email, unclear directive, a meeting that should have been an email, that happens all the time. Um, so yeah, just some of these sort of common blunders around communication, and how can we avoid those types of situations?
Well, I'm going to take the words in the middle of the question here and flip them. Our culture, we say that that meeting should have been an email, as in you wasted my time convening us for a
Mm,
meeting when you could have just told us that content and I wouldn't have had to book time on my calendar to receive this information. But I see the opposite happening a lot more often, and that is an email that should have been a meeting.
mhm,
Because when information is difficult, when people are going to be disappointed or aggravated or resentful or whatever, a lot of times leaders hide behind email and
mm,
they send off the email knowing that they won't have to look into the eyes of the people who are receiving the information, and they won't have to answer their questions at the same time, all at one time. And so I think the most harm I see is when people send out emails that should have been a conversation of some type, dare I even use the T word, telephone. It should
mm.
have been, we should be talking. Email is a great channel to sustain decisions we've already made, to sustain momentum. But if you have to overcome objections or build motivation or change direction, email is the wrong channel. It's just ill-suited to conversations that open, right? For things that are kind of closed down, email is great. And we know this. We've felt it ourselves. Like sometimes we have a long talk with someone and the summary email is quite easy to write. But had we
Mhm.
tried to write this summary email before we talked, it would have been really difficult to write because we need the other person's cooperation and we need them to join. So that's my communication breakdown. I see it a lot is people are hiding behind email or behind Slack. They're choosing Slack when it should have been a phone call or a meeting, and those types of one way narrow channels are just the wrong ones there.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it, as a narrow channel, because it's so true. You are you as in the collective us, is kind of creating some distance by just,
Mm-hmm.
putting it out there, and then you can kind of walk away. You, like, to your point, you don't have to follow up in the moment with questions and clarity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that's a really good note for supervisors too, to hold ourselves to that sort of best practice of maybe my team's message, if I'm typing more than 3 sentences in one message, maybe this is getting a little bit too complicated to throw in a team's channel. Maybe this really
Right.
does deserve a 15-minute phone call, just so we're all on the same page more
Yeah.
quickly. And I think that does sort of catch on once that becomes normalized a little bit of like, hey, I don't want to do a 30 meeting, but a 10-minute phone call would really clarify a bunch of things here. So,
Yes. Like we want to blame email, but email, which is, can be a real burden to us, but it's not email's fault if you choose a message content for the email that doesn't belong in email.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I like that too. We just, again, we have to map the information and the purpose to the medium to the message.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot going on here.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have just a minute or so if anyone does have a question for Leslie here. But Wendy put in here, some emails are so complex that they need to be conversations to explain in detail and allow.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so
Mm-hmm.
true. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When you get those long emails, it's just, it's going to be a headache from the start here.
Yep. Yep.
Let's see. What can happen?
Yeah, Sarah has some great comments about a woman who had been like a mother to her
Mhm.
receiving tough news via an email, and it just made her cry, and it broke her heart. I think this is um, really shameful, and the
Yeah,
person who sent that email should not have done it.
right. Yeah. And then again, what Sarah's saying here, that employee ends up feeling really diminished.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely tough and tricky, but I think, by showing up to a discussion like this today, I know that that's on its own a really good step to trying to improve communications in your organization and on your teams. But yeah, maybe we can end with this one. Just a note from Anne here. Any suggestions about managing or communicating up in communication styles? I would wager a guess here that that's going to be a lot of, information sort of hierarchy in some of those communications. But Leslie, I'll let you answer that one.
Yes, indeed. I would say my first example of drowning my recipient with too many questions is the exact what you don't
Yeah.
do when you're managing up. So I
Mhm.
would say broad ideas with yes, no questions at the beginning of the email. But I would also say the higher up a leader is in the organization, uh, two things affect how you communicate with them. One, they often have somebody mediating their communications. So you have to include that person. If they don't read all their emails or somebody else monitors their inbox, that kind of thing. So you want to include that person and see what that person can tell you about how to communicate with the leader.
Mhm.
And secondly, a leader won't be at all surprised if you ask, what kinds of emails do you like?
Mhm.
We've talked about that a little bit, but if you're asking your reports and your reports know that there are 36 of them and one of you, the question, what kinds of emails do you like, might come across as somewhat insincere. But if you're asking the person 3 rungs above you on the org chart, what kinds of emails do you like from me? For example, do you want me to email you on a single topic each time I have a question for you? Or do you want me to bundle my topics for you? That person won't be surprised at all that you're asking what they like. And I would recommend doing that.
I love that. Yeah. It's making all of our lives easier. And
Hmm.
yeah, I love that. Well, we are at time. So Leslie, thanks so much for
Thank you.
joining us today. This is always so helpful and interesting, honestly. And thanks everyone for joining us online, the day after a long weekend. I appreciate that. I know it's not the easiest thing to do, getting back in the swing of things. But we will meet again in June, per usual, where we will be talking about leading with empathy and authority, trying to strike the balance there. But yeah, Leslie, thanks again for being here. It was a pleasure. And
Thank
thank you
you.
again to everyone online. We appreciate all of the hard work you are all doing in public service here. So we'll see you all in about a month. And Leslie, we'll talk soon.
Yes, thanks. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye.